Well, good morning, or good evening, or whenever you're watching this, good time of day to you. I'd like to just take a few moments to read some nursery rhymes to you. Once upon a time, in a land far away called Ohio, there lived two brothers. These brothers got along famously, and they loved getting Christmas presents. And so one Christmas, the two brothers sat down to open up all of their Christmas presents. And one by one, they each would open up presents, each getting the same amount. And at the end of the day, they had opened all of the presents, both very happy with the amount of presents they had gotten and the kind of presents they had gotten, when the parents said, "There's one more present to be opened." And so then the parents went back into their bedroom and they began to pull out piece after piece of a very nice drum set for the younger brother, with nothing for the older brother. The younger brother got a much nicer present that was worth a lot more than everything that the older brother had gotten. And so the older brother got upset and thought it was unfair that he had not received the same amount of presents that the younger brother had gotten. This was not fair at all. And so he began to become envious and jealous and upset with the younger brother because he had gotten a very nice present when the older brother had not gotten so many nice presents. And that is our nursery rhyme for this morning. So as you may have guessed, I want to talk about envy and jealousy today. So yes, that story is actually not a nursery rhyme. It's a true story about me and my little brother. He got a nice drum set for Christmas, and the presents that I got were not nearly as nice as what he got. And to be honest, I experienced some envy and some jealousy. And for most of us in our lives, we experience these same emotions, whether it's with friends or with siblings, or maybe it's someone that's on social media, or maybe it's somebody famous. We've all experienced envy and jealousy in our lives, but envy and jealousy can be extremely destructive. Listen to what Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 24, verse 7. He says that anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but envy is even more dangerous. Envy is even more dangerous than anger or wrath because it leads us to a couple of different things that I want to talk about. You see, two things tend to happen whenever jealousy is present in a situation. There are two things that happen whenever we see what somebody else has and we want it for ourselves. And the first thing is that we experience a lack of contentment. All of a sudden, what we have isn't enough anymore. And this actually kind of happens a lot around Christmas time, especially when we're younger, because if you're anything like me, Christmas Day, you open your presents. The day after Christmas, you then begin to talk to your friends and your siblings and compare the different items that you'd got. But this jealousy and this envy doesn't just end once you get older. No, it just changes forms. So maybe as a teenager, then you start to experience jealousy over other people's abilities or talents or looks, or maybe their girlfriend or boyfriend, or maybe the amount of followers that they have on social media. So you just change what you're envious of. And this doesn't even end once you become an adult. All of a sudden now you're envious of other people's vehicles or their houses or their jobs or their promotions. Envy doesn't end as we get older. It just changes forms. And when you live with envy, the first thing that happens is that you lose your contentment. You lose your joy and your gratitude for what God has already given you. The second thing that happens is that we begin to build up resentment. So we lose contentment, and then we build up resentment towards the person that you're envious of. All of a sudden you start to justify your lack of contentment by saying, man, they don't even deserve what they have. Don't they know what they did? They do not deserve that promotion or that job, or they don't deserve that amount of likes on social media because honestly, they're not that great of a person. And you start to build up resentment and anger towards this person that you're envious of. You see, we actually see this so clearly in the Old Testament, in the story of King Saul and the future King David. You see, King Saul was the man that was chosen by God to be king, but he started to make bad decisions. He started to make mistakes and not follow God. And so God said, I'm going to appoint someone new. And that man was David. So Saul began to get jealous of David. He would go off to war, and they would both have their battles and their victories, and they would come back, and the people would sing this song. They would say, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. And all of a sudden, Saul wasn't content with what he had anymore, and he saw what David had, and he wanted it for himself. And this didn't just lead to a lack of contentment, it led to a buildup of resentment towards David. So much so that at one point Saul even tried to kill David. And actually, not just at one point, over and over and over, Saul tries to kill David because he's let envy and jealousy build up so much in his life. He resented David and he wasn't content with what he had. This goes directly against what Jesus commanded us to do when he said that, the most important commandment is to love God. And the second one is just like it, to love people. Here's the thing. You can't love God without loving people, because people are created in God's image. They are made fearfully and wonderfully. And when we choose to resent people and not love them, we're not loving God like we're supposed to. What if, instead of resenting people, we chose to celebrate them? I think what you'll find is that if you choose to do this, two things are going to happen. And the first one is this. You're going to experience true contentment. When you focus on what God has given you and gifted you with, and then celebrate what He has gifted other people with, you will experience joy and contentment. What if, instead of me getting upset that my little brother got a drum set and I didn't, I had said, man, I got a lot of good presents this year. And you know what, dude? You got a drum set. Go, learn how to play that drum set and do great at it. I would have experienced a lot more joy and contentment. And the second thing that will happen is that you'll begin to experience confidence. Because whether you realize it or not, if you can choose to celebrate someone else for their gifts and their abilities, you will appear really, really confident. To be a person that doesn't need to say me, 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 but you can look at others and say, look what God has done in their lives. Like, that exudes confidence. So when you can look at your life and say, this is how God has gifted me, and you can look at someone else's life and say, this is how God has gifted them, you will experience contentment and you will experience confidence. What if this week, and honestly this year, and honestly the rest of your life, you chose to love the people that you envy? You chose to celebrate them. And what you'll find is that you will lose the resentment, you will gain contentment, and you will gain confidence in who God has already created you to be.